Okay, so I'm Cherry Potts and I run Arachne Press, which I started 10 and a bit years ago. And the whole of this year, from September through to September 23, we are celebrating our 10th anniversary. We publish mainly short stories and poetry, a few young adult fantasy novels because I like them, and one photographic portrait book because I liked it. And I do it because I like it, basically, Ambrose. But I mean, I started out of a fit of rage with my then publisher, who hadn't paid me and hadn't paid me and hadn't paid me. And I worked out on the back of a fag packet how much she owed me, and it was about £3,000. And it clearly was never going to come. So I withdrew my books from her and said, you may not continue publishing them. And I thought, now what am I going to do? Don't want to be a self-publisher. But on the other hand, how hard can this be, really? I mean, I've worked in bookshops, I've worked in libraries, I've written, I helped out in the publisher's office one summer. You know, how hard can it be? Oh boy, is it hard. It's a bit of a shock. But I'd just been made redundant for the second time in 5 years, and I just thought, stuff this for a game of soldiers. Not going to work for anybody else ever again. Too much like hard work. Too distressing, too everything. And do you know what? When I was 14 and I had a careers advice, I think this is way back in the 70s, and I said I wanted to be a publisher, and they said, oh no, what about librarian? Because I was a girl.
Yeah.
And of course, girls don't do real jobs. And so I did go and be a librarian briefly, and it was very boring.
Yeah.
I wanted to decide what was on the shelves, not put the books on the shelves.
Yeah. So how long would you say you've worked in the industry?
Well, as Arachne, 10 and a bit years. I've never worked for a publisher before that, which is partly why the learning curve was so perpendicular. But I've been writing and being published for the last 30 odd years. So.
And going back to what you're saying about the challenges in setting up and also in running Arachne Press, what was challenging? What were the challenges, and how did you deal with them?
But mostly it was what I didn't know. And one of the things I really didn't understand was what the run-in time on a book is, that Waterstones and Amazon and all the big players want to know about a year before the book's published. And at that point, they want the cover, they want who's in it, they want what it's about, they want endorsements, they want the whole package a year before. And I still can't manage that, because I just can't work that far ahead, because I never know whether I'm going to have the money. So, I mean, I was infuriated last year, and it got round to January, and I was asked what my Christmas books were going to be. I don't know what my Christmas books are going to be. Go away. Yeah. I work, if I can, I work 9 months ahead, and mostly it's 6 months, and a lot of scrabbling about. Particularly when we put in for money for the Arts Council and don't get it, and I then have to rethink my projects, because when we got to our 5th anniversary, I thought it would be quite an idea if I actually had some kind of a plan, wouldn't it, rather than just going from one book to the next, and maybe a 5-year plan even. But I thought, well, that doesn't entirely work for me, because I like to be able to react when a book comes and I go, yes, and it needs now. A really good example, Ria Powell's Roots, which she showed me in January last year. And she said, oh, and by the way, it would be a good idea if it got published this year, because it's the anniversary of the expulsion of Ugandan Asians, and that's what this book is framed around. And I went and looked at my program, so I could fit you in November. but you've got to really work on the edits. There is no leeway. If I say it's got to be with me by a date, it's got to be with me by that date. And I do like to be a little bit more flexible than that. I don't really want to be a dragon to my authors. So having a plan is a plan that's got holes in it that can be filled in a rush if something fantastic comes up, and it is a fantastic book. So it was a good decision. But things I didn't know, I mean, there were things I knew I didn't know. That I knew I didn't know what the right kind of paper was. I knew what I wanted, I didn't know what it was called. And I wrote to every single printer that did books in the country and said, okay, here's my 3 questions. There were probably at least another 2 that I don't know to ask you. And most of them went, oh, go away, you're too new and too little. And I did say, everybody starts with their first book, do you want to be on that journey with me? But I got some really good, useful advice from Clays, who are one of the biggest, who said, you're far too small for us, but try these people. And they've came up with somebody who hadn't been on my list, which was TJI at the time. They're now TJB, down in Padstow. And I contacted them and with the same spiel. And instead of responding, or in some cases not responding, which is what other people have done, they phoned me up and said, okay, these are the 2 questions you didn't know to ask. Don't ask me what they were, I can't remember now. And there's some samples in the post. And I was expecting it'll be sheets of paper with, what it was printed on it. No, entire books with written on the inside. This one is in so-and-so and so-and-so. This one is in so-and-so and so-and-so. And by the way, the bindings are. And they were only 3 a unit cheaper, more expensive than the cheapest one I'd got a quote from. So I went with them and I've been with them ever since. And most of the time they do an absolutely fantastic job. And when they don't, they deal with it. So that's all fine. And I over-ordered for the first 3 books because I was basing it on what my publisher had done. And of course, she was established and had a mailing list, and I was starting from 0. So that was slightly optimistic. I've still got some of the first books sticking around in the cupboards.
And you mentioned funding. How easy or difficult is it, or was it to get funding initially?
Well, initially I didn't even know that I could get funding. I was using my redundancy money initially, and I don't actually know at what point. Oh, yes, I do. First year we did the Solstice Shorts Festival, and I knew you could get funding for that sort of thing, so I put in a bid for that, for the maximum amount I could get in fast, which was about 15 grand, I think. And I got it, and I thought, oh, well. But I had absolutely no idea whether I'd got it by the skin of my teeth or they'd be going, wow, how amazing. And, we want more from this person. So I didn't exactly rush to my next application, because it is a very, very trying process, the Arts Council application. And their systems are fairly clunky, and the questions they ask, you look at them and you think, what? And they've got to fit it into these tiny little boxes, and you get 1,500 characters, including spaces. I have wept over trying to fit my complex ideas into those boxes. And my partner comes and leans over my shoulder and says, well, why don't you put it like this? Because that isn't what I mean. Nightmare.
And has the process gotten easier over the years?
No. They've recently rewritten all of their application things, and there's a lot more emphasis, quite correctly, on diversity and the ecology and things like that. And I did look at doing it MPO status, and I just thought, no, I will spend my entire life meeting requirements that are actually aimed at people like the National Theatre. And I am not set up to do this. I do not have a team of people who can go away and feed this information to them. This is just too much, which was extremely annoying, because I had some big plans which I had to just go, okay. And when you hit 61 and that sort of thing's happening, you think, oh, should I just stop? And that was quite a temptation. And I talked to my partner about it, and she said, well, much though I'd like to see more of you than the back of your head at the computer, I think you'd be bored within about 6 weeks. So no, don't stop.
Yeah. And you mentioned, actually, maybe we start with this. What would you say about the publishing industry? From the time you started up to now. What was it like when you started? How is it now? And where do you think it might go next?
I don't really feel that from my little corner I can speak for the publishing industry as a whole. I think independent publishers, small publishers like me, are getting more notice than we used. It used to be there were the big publishers, and then there were the middling publishers, and then there was us over in the corner doing our thing. And there's been some really notable big wins of prizes and awards for small publishers recently, and people are starting to sit up and take notice. And booksellers don't just go when you get in touch with them these days, because they used to very much lump us with the self-publishing at one point, and you'd contact them and they'd sort of say, no, we don't want your book, before you'd even got half a sentence out. And I do have a distributor, I do have a sales team, I'm just doing you the courtesy of telling you that you have a local author. If you're not interested, do the other one. But they actually pay a bit more attention now, which is encouraging. But when I first started, the big thing in publishing was ebooks, and everybody's going, oh yeah, print's going to go out of fashion like ninepence. And it hasn't, and I knew it wouldn't, because I did quite a bit of research, and I was looking at, okay, so how much of the market is ebooks? And it was around 10%. It's still around 10%. People don't really like ebooks. They only use them as a sort of necessity almost. Yeah, if you're going on holiday for 6 weeks, I wish, and don't want to carry the armload of books that would be, then you take an e-reader. Otherwise, they're a nasty experience, basically. They're not even good for research, which is what I'd thought. Because when I'm writing things, there's lots of research, and I thought, oh, well, I can load up ebooks, and they're so difficult to find anything in. It's just not worth it.
And where do you think the industry might go? Let's say over the next 5-10 years.
Don't know. I mean, I think there's been a renaissance in the print book, weirdly, as a result of COVID. Despite the fact that the bookshops were shut for months on end, people want to rediscovered reading, and they seem to be keeping to it. And audiobooks do seem to be getting quite a bit of traction, but I have to say, they're so expensive to produce. It's a big decision to say, okay, we're going to do an audiobook of any one book, because the commitment that's involved, the time. I mean, editing a print book, you read it several times, but you know how long it'll take you to read it. It'll be long, and I read epically fast as well, which is a useful talent. But when you're editing an audiobook and listening back even to the final version, which in theory should be perfect but frequently isn't, it takes as long as it takes. And that could be 8 hours, 12 hours, 44 hours, depending on the length of the book. That is like, okay, I'm going to sit and I'm going to concentrate on what's coming in my ears as a visual person for a week on this one thing. It's such a challenge to not just drift off or get involved in the story and not notice that it doesn't actually match what's on the page. It's very challenging. And probably I should do what I used to do when I was reading contracts, which is read them paragraph at a time backwards, so I didn't get sort of drift off.
Yeah. And going back to you're setting up Arachne Press, and also to questions around small publishers. What do you think small publishers add to the scene in the UK?
I think we're very nimble, and we're more prepared to take a risk than the big publishers. Big publishers like, sell me the next whatever's popular this week. They just want more of the same, and more from the same people. The 3-book deal tradition encourages that. I mean, it's great for the author who gets the 3-book deal, so always supposing that's not putting them under huge pressure to turn something out when they aren't really up for it. But that really lends itself to more of the same. Whereas independent and small publishers are able to, because we do small print runs. I mean, my biggest print run at a time, apart from the first 3 books where I was making mistakes, is around 500 books. And if those sell, then I'll print some more, because you have to be cautious like that. But it means that you can take a risk on something that might fall flat on its face. That you might find, no, there isn't a market for this innovative new whatever it is, even though there ought to be. And probably one of our biggest problems is there's never enough money for marketing. I mean, I got a free ticket to the Booksellers Marketing Conference one year on the basis that I would do some blogs about it. And oh boy, did I do some blogs. There was this session where somebody was saying, oh, and it's dreadful, we only had £10,000 for the marketing. I wasn't the only person who laughed. There was a hollow laughter coming from all over the hall. And I thought, that's my entire budget for the year, including my salary. Go and get a life, and sometimes authors have this wonderful idea that all publishers can do that sort of thing, and that they're going to have a poster campaign on the tube. Have they any idea how much that costs? And so yeah, we'll take risks, but we can only put a tiny amount of money behind it. So we get very imaginative about our marketing campaigns. How can we do this and not spend any money at all is the ideal. And if we do spend money, how can we make it go a really long way and really hit a lot of people and the right people? So it's all very, very targeted. And our most targeted books have been our most successful ones. And our second book, despite the fact I printed too many, it actually did turn into a bestseller for us, because it was set on the overground between Highbury and Islington and Croydon. And my marketing target was that we'd do a reading at a bookshop or library or something within a mile of at least a third of the stations. And in fact, we did all of them. And people just bought it because of what it was. They didn't care what was in it. Some people bought it just because they liked the cover, because it's a fantastic cover. And it was just really, really, really focused. We knew exactly who was going to buy it. We knew exactly where to market it, and we knew exactly where to do physical events, because it was this line cutting through East London. It's great fun. Tried to talk the overground into letting us read stories on the Tannoy. That they wouldn't let us. I was very disappointed.
Yeah, and drawing on your experience, what would you advise someone who is thinking of setting up a small publishing outfit?
First thing I would do is join the IPG. It is the Independent Publishers Group. There's an Independent Publishers Guild that's in America. So make sure you join the right one. Because apart from anything else, they have a really good guide, which I bought before I joined. So I could have had it free if I joined first. So join first. Which just tells you all of the things that you need to know from the experience of people who've actually done it. And they at one point were running a mentoring system. I don't know if they still are, but that's, if they are, that would be a really good thing to sign up for. And so you've got somebody to say, yeah, not like that, dear. You're wasting your energy. Just move on. It's like, it works like this. Because there are not any number of things that I assumed I would need to do. And having read this book, I thought, oh, well, that's all right. I don't need to do that. Fine, move on. So it's really good bit of myth busting and doing away with the fear factor and just thinking, yeah, actually you can do this all on your own. It is actually possible. Which was, because the point at which I thought I was going to do this is I tend to have my good ideas just between Christmas and New Year, and by the end, when you're sort of back at work and you're thinking, yeah, okay, I'm going to do this. And 11 years ago, actually, pretty much exactly, thinking about it, was the point at which I set up for the website. So let's have somewhere to exist, and then we'll work on the next bit. So I did a few things that's slightly backwards. The most frightening thing was setting up the actual business, registering with companies' houses. What if I do something wrong? Hide eyes, hit button, hope for best,
Yeah.
That really felt like, okay, this is real now. I've told the world.
Yeah. And you also mentioned when you were talking about the Arts Council, you mentioned diversity. What are your thoughts, observations on diversity and maybe the publishing industry or the book industry in the UK?
Where to start? The more of the same and the 3-book deal thing lends itself to things not changing. And to be fair to them, a lot of the bigger publishers are now doing something about diversity, but it tends to be, I have to be careful here, I don't want to slag anybody off, but imagine that I've done all the slagging off. They tend to have mentoring programs or that kind of thing, and it's like they don't think there are any fully formed writers other than white middle-class men out there, that they actually need this help. All they need is you to read the sodding stuff and then publish it. They don't. Nobody need. Well, obviously there are people who do need some support and all of that, but actually what they need is an open door. And it's been well recognized in the publishing industry that part of the problem is that what people from minorities see when they see publishers is actually mostly white women, because there are a lot of women in publishing. And as a white woman, here I am. However, I am also disabled and a lesbian, so I do get some of this. And as a one-woman show, I cannot change this. And nor can I afford to employ people. So that's not going to change how we look to the outside world either. So my approach is that I get guest editors in for specific anthologies. And then the people who impress me in that anthology get an email saying, what else you got? And then we take it from there. And so we've done a bilingual Welsh book, we've done a global majority book, we've done a deaf book. And from each of those, there are collections stroke novels coming. And that's the way I do it, because I'm me. I can't be anybody else. But I want people to feel welcome, and I want them to see themselves reflected in who they're talking to about the book. And it works, rather surprisingly, because I did think, it's the best I can do, but is it enough? And it turns out, yes, it is. And that's what I mean about all people need is an open door. They don't need to be mentored and patronized. and or here, let me help you get into piss off, just read what people send you. Don't gatekeep. Don't go, oh, that's a strange name, put it on one side. Sorry. The other thing that to be aware of sometimes, and I suspect it's not the really big publishers because they've got so many authors, but sort of middling-ish ones, is there's the danger of, oh, we already have a lesbian writer on our books, we don't need another one. So if they find somebody really good, guess what? They publish that and then they don't publish the one they had. There's a one in, one out sort of process. And a lot of publishers are very reluctant to take on disabled writers because they can't go and do the book tour. And that is a major problem. I'm not going to pretend it isn't, but lockdown showed us there are alternatives. And we publish a lot of disabled writers.
Yeah. So just building on that, do you see any significant shifts in the number of writers who are not white, or white, able-bodied male who are coming through?
To me,
yeah, yes. And also in general.
I can't speak for others. I mean, quite apart from anything else, one of the things, when you read for a living, you stop reading for pleasure. So I don't actually pay that much attention to what's going on out there, because I haven't got time to read it. And I mean, if I go in, the rare occasions I go into a bookshop, I pick up a book, I look at the binding before I even read the blurb. And if the binding's not up to scratch, I don't read the blurb. It's ruined me for books. Publishing, it really has. I'm just so critical of other people's stuff. I don't think much of that. But sorry, I've lost my track. What I have noticed is that the awards and the prizes, very definitely, at least the shortlist, if not the winners, but actually the winners as well. I mean, it's been some very notable recent winners. And the Poetry Book Society's book choices and things like that are really actually majority non-white. I hate saying non-white, but it sort of covers a multiple global majority. It's not other people. Really noticeable that last year I just had the choice from them and I got 4 books and only liked one of them, and I thought, is that because I'm not on the same wavelength as them, or is it just because out of 4 books, 1, whereas if I'd gone for the 12-book deal, I might have liked more of them. So I've got a stack, because I haven't had time to read them, of poetry books, and they are almost all by people of either Asian or African origin, which is very encouraging, and a fair few of them by women too. One of them I noticed was by a lesbian. I was going, woo! One, however, and I think our approach of doing lots of anthologies so that we get to see something from an enormous group of people. I mean, just in the process of editing down the very, very long list for our menopause book, and which we're reading blind. We don't know who's written them. But we had, I don't know, 250 stories and poems in for that, and we're only going to include 25, so it's going to be very tough. That the arguments over the final inclusion list is going to be tense, and it'll mainly go about what the themes are that people are writing about. We've got an enormous amount of stuff about whales, because apparently whales are the only other mammal in the world that has a menopause.
Mm.
And people have gone and Googled menopause and come up with that. And there's a lot of people telling us about orcas. So only a couple of those can go in. So it'll be the best of those.
Yeah.
But, you know, I am aware that if it comes down to, right, or these three are all equally good, I will be looking at who's written them at that point, and I will say, right, well, we're going to give an opportunity to someone who wouldn't get it otherwise.
Mm. Mm. And thinking more, thinking about anthologies. Why anthologies?
Well, this goes right back to my taking my book away from my publisher and thinking, right, I can do it at home with a small aubergine. I like to have people to talk to. And so I started with anthologies because that meant very quickly I had a number of authors to talk to, and I wasn't just in this sort of slightly awkward one-to-one relationship with the first published book, which, if it then failed, would have been, okay, well, this was this person. Whereas when it was 26, I think in the first one, it was sort of, okay, so some of this will hit the spot with some people and some of it won't, but that means that enough people will like it enough that they'll buy it. And so it proved. And because I've been published a lot in anthologies and really enjoyed getting to know other writers through doing events together. And one of the things I wanted for Arachne was to create a community for writers. And that's why I have and why we've been able to do our online festival for the 10th anniversary, because there was no money for it. So I just said to everybody, who wants to do something? Whatever it is you want to do, we'll host it and promote it. You set your ticket price, you keep the ticket takings, we'll sell books off the back of it, we hope. And people stepped up and said, I would like to do X and I would like to do Y. And it's very eclectic. It's quite weird, some of the stuff we were doing. But I don't care. They want to do it. And what's interesting is the number of our other authors who are coming along to support them and get involved in a workshop about, I don't know, climate change, or a workshop about transformation, and just going for it. And I think that's lovely. And it's exactly what I wanted Arachne to be. That it's not structured in any way, but that people find each other because we're publishing them.
And also thinking of it from the perspective of the reader. Why would you encourage readers to look at anthologies?
I have always treated anthologies as a sort of smorgasbord. It's a way of getting an opening into a lot of writers in one book. And then I have always done this. I buy an anthology and then I make a list of the people who I'm impressed by, and then I go and see what else they've published. And as a publisher, I'm now doing that from the other way on. I'm going, right, let's have some more from you. But as a reader, that's what I was doing. I was looking for people whose work I liked and then going and finding their complete collection or their novel or whatever. Because there are so many books published every year, and so few reviews happen anymore, particularly in, places like The Guardian or whatever. There's sort of 5 or 6 a week, and and that's it. So how do you find out about these books? Well, how do you find out about the writers? And basically an anthology is a really good way of doing it. And just with I don't even know whose poem it is, but I've finished reading the menopause stuff last night, and one poem I have put hell yes next to. The others, there's yes, or yes with some work, or probably no, or God no. But there's one poem out of these 200 and whatever I've got, oh yes. And I might have a sneak peek and find out who it is, see if they've already got a publisher, because if they haven't, I shall be sort of going.
Yeah, and you also mentioned events. Maybe you could say a little bit more about events in connection with publishing and also the books.
Well, it's something we've always done, because our first book we did in conjunction with Liars League, which is a live literature event. So I sort of just took it in with the book that, of course, that's what you do. You go and do events, and sometimes the events are quite wacky and sometimes they're very straightforward. Yes, you go into a library and you read to whoever rocks up. But we've done things like a recent book. We did a nature walk with poems through the Seven Sisters Country Park, because the book was set on the chalk downlands, and so it wasn't exactly okay, this is where this poem was written, but this is representative of the sort of atmosphere that this poem is there for. That was a performance. That was trying to work out who actually owned the land so we could ask their permission. We thought it belonged to the National Trust and it didn't. So we went up quite a few dead ends before we worked out who it belonged to, and went and bearded them in their office and said, so we would like to do this. And they fell over themselves. Said, yes, of course you can. And can we stock the book? Can you stock the book? Of course you can stock the book. How many would you like? Huge fun. And yeah, Solstice Shorts, which we've been doing for, well, we've done 7, which happens on the shortest day of the year, because back in 2011, I think it probably was, no, 2013, somebody designated the shortest day of the year Short Story Day, and I thought, oh, that's a good idea. But I only heard about it after it happened that year, and I spent between Christmas and New Year thinking, wouldn't it be nice if, and what we could do is, and wouldn't it be great if somebody, and I thought, no, not wouldn't it be great if somebody, we're doing this, me, because it's too good an idea to let go of. I'm not letting someone else have this fantastic idea. And so the first Solstice Shorts ran from sunrise to sunset in Greenwich on the Prime Meridian. And we started off in the library and finished, moved at lunchtime up to the Royal Observatory, the seat of time, and all the stories were about time, and everything was sign interpreted, and we had folk musicians, and basically I just threw in everything I love because I didn't think I was going to do it again, but then I loved it so much I couldn't stop doing it, and so we had a story that lasted about a quarter of an hour, and then we had 3 songs which lasted about a quarter of an hour, and we just cycled throughout the entire day doing that, and it was epic and scary and exciting and wonderful, and I loved every second of it. But sort of collapsed at the end of the day, going, oh my God, I don't think I could ever do that again. That was such hard work. And then immediately started planning the next one. So I love live events. I love getting out and meeting the audience. And one of the things about lockdown, we worked out how to actually make it work so that we actually sold books as well, because the first couple, our first event on Zoom we did with like 2 days notice, because we were supposed to be launching a book, and then lockdown happened the day before, and it was just sort of fling something together, and we didn't sell any books at all because we couldn't work out how to do it. So that was completely pointless exercise, except that it was quite fun. But yeah, the first event after lockdown, which was the launch of Where We Find Ourselves, and a room full of 60 people clapping and cheering and going yes, and I just thought, oh God, I've missed this. I have missed the feedback. It's all just been going into a hole of silence all this time.
Yeah.
And I just love that. I love it when people really react to something.
Mm, mm. So it's also interesting you mentioned lockdown, because right now Britain especially is and even the world is going through a series of crises that are all interconnected.
Yeah.
For example, we've had Brexit, we've also had the pandemic, we've had Black Lives Matter,
Yeah.
and now we've got
Ukraine.
Ukraine, and we've now got the doomsday clock at 90 seconds to midnight.
Yeah.
How have these crisis events or the feeling of the times that we are in now, how have they affected the work that you're doing?
Well, we publish a lot of books that reference climate change, more than I realized, actually. Some of them we do intentionally, and some of them just turn up and you think, oh yeah, that's what this is about, isn't it? It might be quite well disguised, but there it is. So in the last couple of years, we published 2 short story collections which are set in the near future, in which flooding, a stroke drought are the issue. We've published an anthology, Words from the Brink, which was very definitely set out to be a climate change book. We're just about to publish Kate Foley's nth collection, which is called Safe to Cloud, and is about the dichotomy of people living their lives online and ignoring that the world is falling apart around them. And they just keep on dripping in. And in 2018, having endured 4 years of so-called remembrance, which was actually about guess who won the war, we did an anthology called An Outbreak of Peace, which was about it ending and some kind of normality dragging itself out of the wreckage, and about the lives that were ruined and people didn't acknowledge that they were ruined because it's all right now because we've won. And my call out for that said, you are not allowed any rah-rah. There is to be no celebration in this. You regret, distress, fill your boots. Usually I try and ask you to be upbeat. This time I'm not interested in upbeat. I want, don't dwell, but I want, okay, it's over, now what? Because it's never quite over. Not until every last person who is impacted by that is dead is it over, and even then. So we've always had pacifist ecological bent, and we have an eco statement on our website. It says, this is what we are doing. We know it's not enough, but it's only us, we're trying as hard as we can. And if don't be surprised if your box of books turns up wrapped in something strange, because it will be recycled. And it's just, it's a constantly aware of it, and this is what's so challenging, I'm choosing my words, about the Arts Council, is they assume you're doing nothing and need to be taught how to do the things. And we're doing a heck of a lot, actually, thank you. We've got solar panels, all of our electricity is 100% renewable, all of it. And in the summer we're producing our own and then some. We print on wood-free paper here, and when we're doing books for the overseas market, we print them in that country, so there's minimal air miles. All sorts of things we do. We hardly use the car when I schlep boxes of books and banners across London on the tube. It's a nightmare, but I do it. We think about it constantly, and that the trouble with the Arts Council, it always has to be you're doing something new and extra. You can't have I can't have got it right already. You know, there's got to be something else. So I go, yeah, okay. So when I replace my phone, I will get one of these ones from the co-op that can be rebuilt. Okay, but it doesn't need replacing, and I'm not going to replace it until it needs replacing. No, so there's this constant having to think of something new, and somehow it has to be a project. You know, when actually what we're doing is just it's the next tranche of books, and the next tranche of books, and there are themes that sprout periodically. I mean, last year was very definitely eco. This year is older women, but that comes out of what people offer us and what's in the zeitgeist, I guess. I just sort of how I'm feeling at the point I fill in the form sometimes. So what is it I think I'm doing this year? I think I'm doing this year. There you are, there's a project.
Yeah. And on the zeitgeist, why do you think it's important for writers to engage with contemporary issues?
Well, I think if you don't, you might as well just write fantasy. And actually, even the fantasy books engage with it because it's unless you live your life in a complete bubble, you cannot ignore these things. And even if you're not aware of it, it seeps in. I mean, even children's books, the stuff is there. It's dealt with differently, but it's there. Equality and environment and behaving like a sensible, normal human being instead of being a complete and utter bastard. It's sort of the basics, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things I say on our submissions page is we don't publish horror, and we don't publish anything that approaches horror. I do not want to read or hear about sexual violence or and periodically people do send me stuff, and you just think, what planet are you on that you think this is entertainment? Because let's face it, unless you're writing a non-fiction book, people are reading for entertainment. Whatever they think they're doing, they may think they're improving their minds, whatever. They're reading it for entertainment. It is part of their leisure time. Therefore, it has to entertain. How is this entertaining? To whom is this entertaining? I want those people wiped off the planet. Sorry. Just pleasantly, quietly, kindly, but just go away. It's bizarre. When I've got guest editors or for Solstice Shorts, the other people who are organising events in other towns get involved in the choosing, and sometimes something will come in. I'll just think, oh my god, and I would just reject it immediately. And I say, you don't need to read this one. I don't want you to sully your brain. It's just revolting, some of the things people send you, and they think that somehow the rules don't apply to them. And sorry, no.
Yeah. And this is going to be my final set of questions. How have you marked your 10th anniversary?
So, well, we've had the festival, which is ongoing for the next week, and I've actually lost track of how many events because we had to cancel some of them because the authors got ill, but it's around 20. And we've had an exhibition of our cover designers and artists for the last 10 years, which is on at the Stephen Lawrence Gallery in Greenwich, who are great friends. We do lots of events with them. And I was in there in June when I was doing the application for funding, talking to David, who runs it, and saying, what you got on that we could persuade ourselves there's some sort of connection with one of our books and do an event? And we were sort of not finding massively good connections. And he said, oh, but he said, I've had a cancellation. I've got a slot free in January. Would you like to have the slot, Cherry? And I said, and do what? And he said, well, book covers, obviously. And I just put all the other ideas to one side. I said, right, okay, how are we going to do this? Well, how much money am I going to need? How do we work it out? You know, and started emailing artists and saying, do you have the original of this still? Because in some cases it was a pre-existing artwork that we licensed. In some cases it's something that we've commissioned, but sometimes it's started as an artwork and then it's been manipulated to meet our commission. And so it's sort of quite weird and wonderful collection of stuff. And so I can now put curator on my CV because having done this, a lot more work than I thought. Because I'd put, 2 days for hanging, and David said, no, it'll take a week. And I said, really? He said, trust me, it'll take a week. And it did. And I'd spent quite a long time planning it before we got there, because he'd sent me a 3D thing of the gallery so that I could, with the exact measurements on. So I was working out what would fit where, and therefore what order I would put them up in. And so I decided it couldn't possibly be words gone. Couldn't start with first book and work our way through. Can't think what the word is I want. Chronological. So instead, there's where we've worked with somebody a lot, like Kevin Threlfall, who's done more covers for us than anybody else. He's got an entire wall to himself. And then I've just gone sort of colours so that it looks nice on the wall. Basically, it starts blue, goes through yellow and orange, and ends up the other side. And then we've got 2 walls, which are the people we've only ever done one cover with, and then a couple of walls where we've got 2 or 3 things from people. And it's interesting when you look at it all together that there are these themes that I hadn't noticed. I mean, I know what I like. There's a lot of lino cuts and things like that in there, but there's an enormous number of things that are using paper as part of the design. So it's sort of scrumpled paper or cut paper or something like that. Even when it's faked, sometimes it's actual paper, because we have a couple of artists who use paper cuts and make little sort of scenes and then photograph them. So they're great fun because you get endless varieties that you can choose from. So if we light it like this or we light it like that, and I love those. And then there's some that are just paintings or prints or whatever, and some of them are line drawings, and just it looks very fine up, I have to say. And normally the galleries, because I said, for the Arts Council, I need a rough idea of audience. How many should I say? I said, well, they usually get about 10 people a day. They're getting 50 a day. I was there this morning just replenishing the stock of postcards, because I'm getting rid of my old stock that way. So free, take a postcard, and people get very excited. And 5 people came in the 20 minutes I was there. So it was first thing in the morning. So it's clearly getting some interest, which is nice. And we're doing a couple of events there. One of the artists, Suman Gujral and Ria Power, who's poet, are doing a joint event on the 9th of February, talking about the intersection between the way they both work and the themes in their work, which are about diaspora and emigration and the making of journeys, basically. And then we're going to have a little hands-on workshop with family photographs and or poems or whatever, and turn them into boats, paper boats, and they're going to be displayed in the gallery as part of that. And then dates are yet to be decided because we're trying to wrangle people, but we're going to do a BSL tour of the gallery, so people can come and talk to me about why on earth it is like it is in BSL if they need to. But it's open to everybody, but it'll be BSL interpreted, but we haven't quite tied down a date for it yet. And then I'm going to do a talk to some of the students, apparently, because the head of department came to the private view, and I gave him a personal tour of the entire thing. He wanted to know about every single picture. And then he said, all right, would you like to do a talk for the students? I said, yes, but I think they should come down here, and we'll do it in here though, because then they can sort of say, this one, tell me about this, rather than it being theoretical.
Yeah. Yeah.
So don't know when that's happening, but
Yeah.
sometime before the 15th of February when it closes.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, thinking about the cover design, and maybe if you could say a little bit more about some of the processes that you use when choosing covers.
Okay, well, it's changed quite a bit, because initially I just went looking for a suitable image and then said to the author, can we license this? And then we had a competition for the 4th and 5th book, I think, to find, and I spent a lot of time online writing to artist collectives and people like that, groups where I could say, you might know someone who might know someone, and everybody, I said, please spread this around. We had a phenomenal number of entries for that, and we had a public vote on it. So the most hits the website got that week, it went from sort of like this to over here somewhere. I think we had 9,000 hits in a day for people voting, which was great fun. Nearly crashed it. And after that, I had a group of people whose work I liked that hadn't necessarily been picked, but you know, I'd seen what they were like, and so I had a little set of people to approach if I thought of it. And then I started going to degree shows for design courses and that sort of thing, and finding people that way. And I sort of just go around, oh, I quite like that, take a postcard, stuff it away. Next time a cover comes up and you're thinking, now I saw something that was so, and go and look. The number of them who weren't maintaining their websites and you couldn't get through to them, but never mind. But worked quite a few people that we found that way. And more recently, when we started doing these really focused anthologies, so that when we did the global majority one, where we find ourselves, I said, okay, we have to have someone from the global majority for the cover. I am not having a white artist. And it has to be abstract, because otherwise we're going to leave somebody out. And we can't have something that's obviously African when we've got all these East Asian and Mexican and South Asian people involved, because that's excluding them. It's got to be abstract. And we spent, it felt like a year researching that. Spent so much time on Instagram or following leads from people going, no, that's not right. And then my marketing person, Sarah, said, friend of my sister's, you might like her work. And I had, yes, this is it. And so contacted Cromwell and said, can we have that, please? And maybe that as well, actually, because we've got some other books coming up. And talk to the guest editors, Sandra and Lila. And the first one I'd chosen, they said, no, it's too volcanic. It's too aggressive. Okay, that's fine. I'll use that one for Words from the Brink. I'm perfectly fine with that. What about this one? It's nice and blue and yellow and more calm, and has this sort of, it looks a bit like it could be a constellation of stars, and it also looks a bit like it could be water with light reflecting on it. So it sort of had that sort of journey sort of feel to it. So could even be islands, you know, it's sort of, that's what I love about abstract. You can make it mean what you want. And so from there on, where we've got something that's really particular, I'm actually going for an artist from the same background as the author. So we have a deaf artist for our deaf book. Suman's work that we used for Ria's book, that was fascinating, because she came to one of the readings for Where We Find Ourselves, the one at Clapham Library, and then put something on her Instagram about it. So therefore I saw it, and I thought, oh, this woman's interesting, and realised I was actually already following her, but I hadn't made any connection, and had a quick look through, and I said, Simone, you wouldn't like to do a cover for me, would you? And we had, because it was still very early days out of lockdown and being very careful. So she took me a tour around her studio with her laptop, you know, sort of, and I was going, stop, back up a bit. Let's have a look at this one, which was huge fun. And then we actually ended up using the actual plate for an etching. I think it's an etching. My print technology knowledge is sort of tiny. I know what I like, but I'd never know what it is. And so we actually used the actual plate rather than a print from it. So it's got these wonderful surface marks and things. And so that's actually in the exhibition as well, the actual plate. That was exciting. It got delivered to the wrong place. You know, one of a very few pieces that were completely unique and irreplaceable, and it got to the wrong place. We got it back, but that was a nasty moment. And it's absolutely beautiful in real life, you know. And what's been interesting about doing the exhibition is that the pieces that are original works, I had never seen them in their original form. I'd only ever seen any of these things electronically, digitally, and to actually see the actual thing, and you think, oh, it's a completely different color than I thought in some cases, and I like what we did with it better, fine. Or, my goodness, this is really something, this is really special. I mean, I bought a couple of the pieces because they've been sitting around because they couldn't be delivered to the gallery until the day we started putting them up, because over Christmas nobody was there because it's part of the university. And so a lot of stuff was delivered here, and I opened it to make sure it was in one piece, you know, and there were things I was looking at here, getting all sort of, I want it. So I have bought one or two pieces. I don't know where I'm going to put them. I've got no space, but I just couldn't. I couldn't bring myself to pack them back up and send them home to their artist. They've got to stay here.
And in all that we've said, are there things that you'd like to add or emphasize?
I think it's really important to say that I absolutely love what I do. I love finding spectacular writers and giving them an opportunity. In some cases, they don't need my opportunity, but I you know, sometimes it's me having the opportunity to publish them. And just exploring sort of corners of the world that I know very little about. I mean, publishing the Welsh book, I spent a lot of time in Wales, but I've never been to North Wales, beyond just over the border. And in the course of taking that book on tour, I have been to every nook and cranny of the A470. And I absolutely understand why Sian chose that as the theme, because it is a Marmite road. It's fantastic when it's fantastic, and it's a nightmare when it's a nightmare. And I had a very, very happy day, basically driving very slowly south down the A470, taking my time. And every time I got stuck behind something that was annoying me, I'd pull over into a lay-by and look at the view for a bit. It's probably the most enjoyable drive I've ever done. I don't really like driving. And I would never have done that if we hadn't done that book. And listening to the Welsh poets reading their poems in Welsh, and because I was taking it on faith a lot with the editors that these were good poems. I mean, the translations were absolutely lovely, and you know, when we were doing it initially, I was sort of Google translating the ones that come in just in Welsh, and going, okay, well, now I know what it's about, but what has Google done to it? And one of our favourites was that one of the poems was called Around 4 Hours, which is about how long it takes to drive from the top to the bottom. And Google translated it as 4-hour sex. And I reread the poem and I thought, I think that must be a mistranslation. I can't see how it's got to there, but I left it like that just for a bit. So for everybody to enjoy before we decided what it actually ought to be. So there are lots of incidental pleasures, but the biggest pleasure is discovering a writer who's new to me, even if they're not new to writing, and getting really excited. And sometimes I get in touch with people. I say, I like what you've done here. Is there more? And they say, yes, but it's with someone else. Darn, missed it. Wasn't quick enough. And sometimes I say, I like what you've done here, and is there more? And they misunderstand me and think that I don't like it enough, and I'm asking for something different. I had a wonderful miscommunication with Ness Owen when I was doing what I call a short fat anthology, which is 5 or 6 authors and 5 to 10 pieces each, so that they get a bit like doing a pamphlet but putting them all together. And she'd sent me 10 poems. I thought, my goodness, these are good. This is far too good to just go into it. So have you got some more? And she misunderstood and thought I meant they weren't good enough. And actually what I actually was saying was, have you got enough to make a collection? Because there's going to be one. And the answer actually was yes, once we got ourselves untangled. And that was the start of the Welsh journey, because she was writing poems about Welsh language in English. And I contacted her and I said, I think I know why this is, but I also think these ought to be in Welsh, really, shouldn't they? What do you think? And we had the conversation about the Welsh not, and not being taught in Welsh, being taught Welsh as though it's a foreign language. Can you imagine being taught your own language that you speak perfectly as though it was a foreign language? What a insult. And so she wasn't confident in written Welsh, and which is incredibly complex anyway, particularly for poetry. I don't think anybody's completely confident in it, and people who are just blagging it. And so I said, okay, these are going into Welsh. I am not, side by side, we'll have the English as well, because they're fantastic poems. And just the fact that somebody who writes as well as she does is denied writing in her own language, unspeakable. I was so angry on her behalf, and she's sort of going, it's like, no, you should be angry, Ness, you should be angry. And that's where A470 came from, because I thought, well, she's hardly going to be the only one that this has happened to. So let's do a bilingual book and invite people to come bring us their poetry in English or Welsh. And if they feel comfortable in both. And then if they want to translate their own, they can translate their own. Otherwise we will, or we'll support them to do the translation, whatever. But they're going to translate in both directions, and there will be 50 poems in English and Welsh, because Welsh is not a second-class language. And just, I could go on for a very long time about what I think about what happens to the Welsh language. As a non-Welsh speaker, I have no right to do so, but sometimes you just see something, you just think, why on earth is this happening? This is not okay. So in our little tiny corner, we're doing something about it, and we'll continue to do so. We're just trying to think what the best theme would be for our next one.
And then maybe we end on this question. If from the books that you've published, do you have 3 that you could you can recommend to people listening, and why? And 3 is an arbitrary number, totally arbitrary.
That is really tough. Okay. I think, God, that's a really difficult question, Ambrose. I mean, I can't even say these are my three favorites, because that isn't necessarily the ones I'd recommend. You completely stumped me.
Yeah, yeah. And it's an unfair question as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've published over 50 books, and
Yeah.
I love all of them. Some of them are more successful than others. Some of them have been luckier than others.
Or
Okay.
maybe
Okay. No,
oh,
no,
sorry.
I'm going, I'll give you one quirky one, which is a children's book. It's aimed at 6 to 7 year olds. So, reasonably confident readers on their own, but still like to be read too. And it's called The Old Woman from Friuli. And it's about land rights, as it happens. So it's illustrated by Ed Boxall, who's done a couple of covers for us. And it's written by my mum, who died just before Christmas. And I can remember her telling me this story when I was, knee high. And she says that she thinks possibly it's an Italian folk story, but she can't remember where she picked it up from. But the thing is that the Duke wants everything he can see from his castle to belong to him, but there's this one little house spoiling his view, and it belongs to the old woman. And he tries everything. He tries offering her marriage. He tries forcibly taking it away from her. But you can't overcome a woman from Friuli, because the people of Friuli are the most stubborn people in Italy. And the old people, the women of Friuli, are more stubborn than the men. And the old women are even more stubborn than the young ones. And of course, she wins. And it's just lovely. And the illustrations are lovely. And it's a nice message. It's a don't mess with us message. So that one, for entirely sentimental reasons. I think A470, even if you've got no interest in the Welsh language, it's in many ways a hilarious book. I mean, the bonkers idea, a book in praise stroke condemnation of a road. Why not? And it has everything in it, absolutely everything. We really could have done that book twice. We had to be really strict because the budget for translation is so we actually did have 52 poems in the end, because we used some of them as end papers, and 2 of them are really short, so we doubled them up. But we could have done it twice. The quality of this poetry we got in was just stunning. And some of the decision making, we had 4 poems, or it might even have been 5, that were about relationships breaking down on the A470, and 2 of them were in the same lay-by. We can't put all of these in. This is ridiculous. I was quite tempted to do a pamphlet of just those 4 or 5, because they were all equally good, and it was just, okay, how do we get the sheet of paper between these and decide which one? In the end, we drew lots, blind, so we just had bits of paper with the different notes on, picked one out. They were that good. So that one, just for people who absolutely love poetry and have an interest in language. And I think Where We Find Ourselves, poetry and short stories, and it's so eclectic, despite the fact that it's quite a tight call, because it was Well, you're in it. What did we say when we put the call out? I can't remember.
I remember.
Was it journeys? Maps and mapping. That was it.
Mm.
Maps and mapping. That the so that it gave people plenty to play with at the same time as being quite narrow, because we didn't want to tell people what to write about at the same time as we still needed it to sort of have some kind of a shape, because putting together an anthology shape is so important, because you've got all these different voices and different takes on things. If you haven't got a theme of some kind, it just becomes, well, you're just throwing them together and there's no meaning to it.
Mm.
And one of the really interesting things about editing is of collections and anthologies is how each story or poem plays off against the ones on either side of it, and how you get an arc through. And I love that. It's rather the same as hanging the pictures, actually. The logic, they have to work together and separately, and what's opposite them and all this. I suppose that's what editing is. Editing and curating, they're the same thing. It's interesting. Didn't realise that until this morning.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Sherry. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you for asking me, Ambrose.